Hey everyone, if you like the Roast West Coast Coffee podcast, you might also appreciate the I Like Beer the podcast. Listening to these guys is like being a fly on the wall of the pub with a few of your favorite mates having a pint. These professional beer appreciators have plenty of stories to share on everything from the mating habits of penguins to their behind-the-scenes brewery experiences. Check out the I Like Beer the podcast wherever you are listening to this show about coffee, or head to ilikebeerthepodcast.com. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 14 of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. I'm Ryan Wolt, and this is the show where I bring you the stories of coffee professionals, entrepreneurship, and coffee education. Today, I'm joined by Jared Hales. He, along with several members of his family, owned and operate Hacea Coffee Source in Anaheim, California. Besides being a co-owner, he is the acting coffee buyer and broker. Hacea is the company that works the supply chain between the farmers, coffee brokers, and co-ops, and your favorite local coffee roasters, home roasters, and anyone else who has a need for green coffee. On the show today, we're going to talk quite a bit about working with family, and what makes someone take that next step from working for the man to becoming the man. The next time you're on the internet, be it on your phone or computer, I'd appreciate it if you'd head to roastwestcoast.com and subscribe to the newsletter that goes along with this show. You'll find show recaps, more coffee news, education, and updates on what is happening with guests and partners of this show. The newsletter is always free, but if you choose to pay for a subscription or buy us a cup of coffee, it'll help us continue to grow this show. And the show is why you're here, so let's get into it. I'm drinking a batch brew from Moster Coffee that I picked up on my way to the podcasting booth earlier today. It was a very roundabout trip, considering the podcast booth is in my closet, and Mostra isn't. But hopefully I've stalled enough here for you to fill up your own cup of coffee, because it is time for this interview with Jared Hales of Hacea Coffee Source on the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. Jared, it's really nice to meet you. Yeah, welcome to the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. And before we get too far, if you could just state, your name, what your business is, your job title, favorite Ninja Turtle if you have one.
Yeah, my name is Jared Hales, owner and operator of Hacea Coffee Source. Favorite Teenage Ninja Turtle? Never really watched it.
Oh, it hurts me in my heart a little bit.
I'm so sorry.
I'm about 50-50 with people I ask that question to now. That was just all a little trick to get you to pronounce the name of your business.
Gotcha.
Which, when I was looking at it, I was like, man, I could say this a bunch of different ways. Let's start by, what are you drinking over there? It looks like you have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's why I was about 2 minutes late there. Sorry. I'm drinking a Kenyan coffee we just brought in. I brewed it with the Tricolate brewer. Have you seen that brewer before?
I have not.
It's pretty interesting. The idea is you can get some pretty high extractions with less coffee. So far it works pretty well.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. And never apologize for being late if you're making a cup of coffee. We're just fine with that. I'm actually drinking a coffee myself, which I don't always do on the show, just depending on when we record, but I just made a pour-over Morning Dove coffee from Lofty Coffee. Lofty is not like an official sponsor of this show or anything, but I just want to say it on the record that I stopped by there and had this coffee on their batch brewer the other day, and I was just like so taken with it that I bought a bag to bring home.
Excellent.
So thanks for that.
I try to visit Lofty every time I'm passing by.
I try to visit a lot of new shops, and I don't want to say that means I forget about some of like these great long-term roasters, but I was like, no, I'm going to make a concerted effort today to drive down and stop there. That's the only thing I'm doing. And it was definitely worth it. I wanted to kind of get some backstory on you and on this business. And I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. It's Hacea.
So part of our name development, if those listening don't already know, we have 4 family members are equal partners in our business. And when we first came up with the name, we disagreed on how to pronounce it and still do. So I would say there's no right way to pronounce it or wrong way. I say Hacea. A lot of people say Hacea. It's kind of whatever flows.
Whatever sounds good to the person who's buying the coffee, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so let's go back before that. You're working with family, but prior to opening this business, did you have any experience running a business or owning a business or working with family?
So I've worked in coffee since 2008 in various roles in the supply chain, obviously on the US side of things. I have quite a bit of experience in manager positions during that time. So, although I've never owned my own business prior to this, I had a lot of experience managing other people's businesses, as did, my family. So, we're all managers outside of Hacea, right? As far as working with family goes, yes, actually, my previous position, I was fortunate enough to have my wife working there. My sister worked there for a time. My brother, who is now a business partner, worked there. And my friends worked there as well. So definitely working with friends and family is not new to me. It's actually quite normal, which, I think has great positives. There's the human element and the dramatic element of it where personal relationships bleed into work, right? But I feel like personally, I'm pretty good at keeping things separate and professional.
And let's bring your brother into the room. No, I'm just kidding. Well, that's really interesting. I've said on the show a bunch, but I've worked with family quite a bit too. And in the early days of our relationship, my wife and I worked together quite a bit. You know each other better and you can kind of predict each other better. But sometimes when there's disagreements, it can be a little bit more emotional and harder to navigate
Right,
because this is someone that you can't just go home and take the day off from being family.
right, exactly. And so like you kind of hinted at, the trust and the dependability is there 100%. It's just when the conflicts come up, they're a little bit more intense and passionate, as you put it. So I think having kind of boundaries, for example, if it's off hours, which are pretty slim hours around here, we're not really talking about work after 9 p.m., let's say, right? It's like, okay, turn it off. We're done with that.
Or you get a jousting stick out and you settle it like like you're 12 years old again.
Right.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Let's talk about you specifically and just you said you've been working in coffee since 2008 in some capacity. Did you have kind of a first experience with coffee that made you think this is really interesting? I want to get into this sort of industry as a career. What led you down that path?
That's kind of a big question there, but I started actually my first job. You could kind of consider it coffee. Was McDonald's. I was working in the McDonald's drive-through in high school, and so obviously brewing up McCafe drinks with the push of a button. No, but then my friends had actually worked in a coffee shop together for a couple of years before I got a job at a friend's coffee shop. They purchased this local shop and needed people, and so I kind of jumped in more from just a teenage customer service position, and then started going to school, college, and then managed that shop. The manager that was originally there when I started was an SCA. Back then they had like level one, level two, right? So he was an SCA certified barista, and he is the one who taught me how to, prepare espresso correctly, and the whole best practices. And then kind of from there, having friends who were also in the coffee industry, we kind of exchanged, mostly customer stories, right? But also coffee stories. And just kind of the longer we all did it, the more we obviously started to learn just naturally. I wouldn't say I was actively seeking out new coffee information for a long time until I don't know until I saw green coffee for the first time, and my mind was kind of blown. And I really can't explain it. There's just something about it where like a whole door opened, and I realized I knew nothing, and this was an entire industry, like a machine, right? Just feeding the world, really. I mean, there's something like 2.5 billion cups of coffee drank every day globally. And so seeing green coffee kind of just sparked something in me where I really wanted to learn more and be a part of, really, it sounds cheesy, but part of something bigger than just a coffee shop. And kind of never really looked back. I started to just show up at this place that had green coffee, and I would sweep the floor. Literally, I would, hey, where's the broom? I'll sweep till you hire me, you know. And that's how it went down. I started working for a coffee importer. I was actually delivering sacks of coffee and managing the warehouse and the coffee. And so from there, also started learning to cup and sample roast and roast. And yeah, the rest is kind of history.
You mentioned that you saw green coffee and a door opened,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people have moments like that, but it's a scary moment where you could close that door. You could also say, you know what, I don't want to step through and discover this thing. But if it happens to be the thing in your life that you're passionate about, it seems like a no-brainer. Like I'm stuck now. I'm following this till the end. But that's not always the case, I think, and it depends on the person and the personality. But I want to make sure that people know, where are you guys based? We didn't actually say that at the beginning,
We're based in Anaheim Hills, right off the 91 freeway.
which is to me kind of a unique location because you're between LA, you're between Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, up and
Right.
you've kind of have access to everything.
Right.
What kind of benefits or challenges do you face kind of having your business there as that pivot point?
Well, like you said, I mean, we're from that area. I was actually born in the hospital on the same freeway exit that I take to get there now. So definitely familiar with the area, but we really chose that specific area because of the access, right? I mean, we were looking in places around Fullerton and Orange, basically anywhere near the 91 freeway where we could get to the 5 quickly. That way, as you put it, we can get out to Riverside, San Bernardino. So the decision to be there was very much intentional for that access. We also are doing, a lot of tastings in person, and we're hosting classes. So it was important that the space be somewhat presentable, which didn't stuff us into the back of a hardcore industrial zone. So that was another criteria that we kind of had to meet. Honestly, we haven't felt any negative aspects of being where we're at so far. We have great neighbors.
That's very good. And I apologize to you and to anyone listening because I'm a little jumpy this morning. This is my second or third cup of coffee, so I've kind of
Same.
jumped out of the timeline a bit. But you're working in coffee and you're working for a coffee importer and you're learning as you go. At what point do you start thinking about opening your own business and opening it with your family and saying, "Man, this is just something we're managers and we want to go to that next level."
Right. Honestly, I almost said last year. I feel like pandemic start to now is kind of 1 year, right? 1 year or three, what's the difference?
Yeah, it's one circular loop that until we get
Yeah.
out of it is all just the same day.
Right. So I almost said last year, but really it was back in probably early 2019. My family and I started getting together and kind of talking that way, not about coffee, but just, in the context of, hey, we're all in management positions with a lot of responsibility. We all know, you know, how to run things, basically, is what we we're kind of realizing. And the conversations turned into, why don't we do something? Why don't we do something together? If we can do it for somebody else, then we can certainly do it for ourselves. And so we had started doing meetings somewhat regularly and kind of talking about what we might actually do. And it wasn't until March 2020 when the pandemic actually, took full effect. I got laid off. And within a month, we had our green coffee business. It was an easy choice.
It forced the decision. How
Exactly.
did you come up with that name? You mentioned that it causes some dissension, so to speak. But how did you choose it? And then kind of, what does it mean? And then you guys have an interesting logo, and I have a thought on it, but I want to know how you would describe it.
Right. So we honestly, we no exaggeration wrote down about 250 to 300 names. It was quite a process. Maybe another drawback of working with family is everyone is somewhat similar in personality types. And so it was really difficult to find something that we could all agree on because we're so stubborn. Or as you probably know, there's just a lot of coffee companies out there. So it's kind of difficult to find, a name that hasn't been taken that you like. So ultimately, how we found this name, we actually took the plant family name that coffee is a part of, which is Rubiaceae, and combined our family name, which is Hales, and kind of just did a little custom mashup to get Hacea or Hacea.
And then the logo, how would you describe the logo?
I'm kind of curious to hear what you think before I answer that.
So I waver because every time I've looked at your website, my brain will go, oh, there's an avocado, or it'll go, oh, there's a climbing carabiner. Uh, oh,
Okay.
maybe it's a coffee bean, but I still think it looks more like a carabiner to me. But I think I've had a different reaction kind of every time, and it's a very kind of an oval, oblong, maybe an
Mhm.
abstract coffee
Right.
bean thing if I were thinking about it from a design standpoint. But
So the first version, we all looked at it and we thought that's an avocado.
oh,
But so we actually had to make some changes to it to try and make it less like an avocado. Again, the avocado joke remains. So this is definitely going to reignite a lot of conversation here.
oh, that's good. I'm glad. Hey, I love avocados. It's my one of my favorite foods. So
But no, it was actually at the very surface level based on a motorcycle drivetrain, so chain and sprocket. So you have the drive sprocket and then the sprocket on the wheel and the chain or belt to drive it, right? That's like at the very, very surface level. One of the things that we all have in common is we all ride motorcycles together. It's probably the only activity that we all do, collectively. So at the very surface, it was kind of based on that. And if you go into our tasting room, we kind of have some little splashes of motorcycle culture in there. Actually, the colors were pretty much taken directly from Husqvarna motorcycles.
I was going to ask if you had a brand that your family was partial to.
Yes, we own quite a few Husqvarna motorcycles. Too many probably. This logo was developed by our good friend Nathan, who he's a professional designer and branding expert, and he took us through hours and hours of Q&A, and it was really really in depth kind of questions about who we were going to be, and he is incredible for that because he can kind of guide someone onto another level that personally I can't really get to on my own. And so, not only is it at the first glance that drivetrain, but also, an infinite loop of connectedness. Hacea is really about connection between producers and roasters. Our role in this supply chain is really a middleman, not to put it too glamorously. So kind of realizing that and leaning into that and adding value with our service, our transparency, the quality. We need to make sure that the producers and exporters that we work for or work with are happy and the roasters that we work for or with are happy, and everyone in between is happy. If everyone is, getting a win in their own role in the supply chain, there's no reason why, the business can't continue year after year in a very sustainable way. And the word sustainability gets kind of blown out of proportion in coffee. But what I kind of mean by that is recurring business, right? We're not interested in one and done on any level. We're not interested in buying from a producer one year and bailing the next. We're not interested in selling to a roaster one time and never seeing them again. We're really focused on these long-term kind of business relationships because I think that they really are more sustainable and resilient, especially in times like now where everything is so out of whack and so unpredictable. These long-term relationships that I've had with producers and roasters have kind of what made this whole thing possible.
Sure. Let's make it clear just for anyone listening what Hacea is doing, which is you as the middleman, you're working with producers and farmers and other brokers to bring coffee into your business, which you are then
Exactly.
distributing out in a sales format to roasters or who is the customer for you guys?
It's really all roasters. We only offer green coffees. And as you said, we're working with, depending on the country of origin, a few different actors in this industry. It could be a farm owner directly, it could be an association or a co op of small farms, it could be an exporter who's working with those people on our behalf, it could be a washing station owner, right? It's complex, something that I love about coffee, actually. And then we bring the coffee to the US and we sell only unroasted green coffee to roasters, really of all sizes. So we not only do we sell the full sacks of coffee that coffee is traditionally exported in, but we also break them down and we weigh out 1 pound, 5 pounds. We even offer a 20-kilo sack that we make ourselves to roasters who are just hobby roasters doing it for fun and learning, or startup roasters, side hustle roasters who are doing it in their garage and just selling to friends and family, and all the way up to containers of coffee to more established roasters with multiple shops and wholesale programs and everything. So in a brief answer, our customer is roasters. In a longer answer, they're really all sizes and various walks of their kind of roasting journey.
Sure. Has there been any impetus to do your own roasting? I mean, making this choice to work in the middle is a choice clearly. So, was there anyone on the in this family structure that was like, we should take this step too, or do both sides, or how did you decide to just stick with the green coffee for now?
That may have been discussed very early on, but probably got a hard no from me. I have had the luck and opportunity to really learn kind of this niche industry of green coffee. And so I really wanted to lean into that specifically. I think that those are my skill sets. As I mentioned, I have relationships on both ends. And so I really wanted to continue working with those people. And I don't want to compete with our customers, really. I mean, it's a hard game. The roasters, they have the best margin, but they have the most competition. And so I'm happy to be supporting roasters and not in that competition field.
You don't roast, but what you do is you offer coffee education 101 courses, which I was reading about.
Right.
You do brewing courses, roasting, tasting. How did you guys go about developing those classes and kind of, besides obviously just selling tickets, like what is the goal of the class for you guys?
Yeah. I started teaching those classes at my previous position like about 6 years ago now. And actually I have recently kind of done the math on that, and I think that's close to about 700 people that have come through classes that I've taught, which is kind of crazy because I'm actually a very shy person and I hate public speaking. So that has been critical for my personal development. But anyway, the classes for me are not anything new, right? Really, they're kind of I feel like they're pretty dialed in based on those 700 people that have asked me all sorts of funky left field questions, that I would never expect, which has been great. I knew that when I started the business, I wanted to continue doing those classes for that reason. I mean, like I said, I get questions that I would really never think about on my own. And so it kind of forces me to look at things from a different perspective and from there really stretch me and my knowledge. So if someone asks me a question, I'm happy to say I don't know. Let me try to find out, right? And then that way when the next time that gets asked, or I'll even follow up with that person specifically, and I'll have that answer hopefully. Or maybe the answer is no answer.
My my first thought when you started talking about this was, I wonder what the weirdest question has been. Do you have any that stand out to you that were like,
uh,
man, where did that come from in a coffee class?
I none come to mind, honestly. I feel like all the questions are fair. So I would say out of all those 700 people, as kind of a funny anecdote, I had one person insist on milk and sugar in their cupping. I gave them milk and sugar.
That's a really interesting in the cupping where you're trying to
Yeah,
get the flavors. You know what? I think the best coffee for anyone is the coffee that they're drinking, to
I
an
agree.
extent.
The coffee that they're enjoying,
The
I would
coffee
say.
they're enjoying that makes them want a better cup of coffee and to come to a class.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm wondering if there's anything, about working with coffee for almost 15 years now that really says surprised you or that you kind of learned the hard way through experience. And maybe we can even dial that in further, like anything you've learned over the last 2 years while you were starting your own business that surprised you.
Interesting question. I mean, it's a big one, right? So,
Yeah, I like big, broad questions. That way I have to make you think about it. But I'm also thinking, there's a step that you and your family have taken where you went from managers to owners. And I'm
mhm,
wondering if there was any growing pains to some extent. And if there's anything you're like, well, I wasn't expecting this. And maybe
sure.
it's coffee specific, maybe it's business specific, maybe it's just, day to day life. I think I made it bigger.
You did, you did. Let me hit the first part. I mentioned I started working at a coffee shop in high school. So I have really spent my entire adult life working in coffee. So it's kind of hard to say what about coffee specifically has kind of, I guess, what have I learned or what has shaped me? Because I mean, I am shaped by this, because I've been in it as I've grown into an adult, and my entire life is around coffee. So I've learned, as I mentioned, in just doing the classes, public speaking, communication. Green coffee specifically has opened me up to international cultures and languages. So I get to talk to people on different continents on a daily basis, right? From getting to the second part of your question, I I feel like nothing has been super dramatic in the changeover other than the level of stress, which has honestly decreased significantly as the freedom to kind of do things the way that I want to do them. Obviously, I have to get the approval of my partner slash family, but for the most part, just being able to run things the way I think they should be run, transact in the way that I think that they should be done. All these things have really been a lot easier, to be totally honest, than in my previous position where I couldn't exactly have that freedom to do things, at least at the really, really high level, exactly as I wanted to. As far as like challenges, it sounds kind of crazy, but I've just been doing the same thing for so long that I just kept doing it really. So I haven't really faced anything too crazy. Now I would say the pandemic, it would be the big exception to that. We are essentially logistics providers, right, to get coffee from point A to point B. And logistics has just been totally turned upside down. That has definitely been a huge challenge, but everyone is dealing with it. So it's not like we're isolated or having to figure it out alone, right? Everybody is kind of in the same boat, sometimes literally. So we're all just trying to figure it out together. And I have a lot of good relationships with, basically our competition, other traders, other importers. And so I'm constantly talking to them and exchanging information and trying to learn from people who know more than me. But yeah, the pandemic has been crazy. I couldn't even begin to explain the complexities in less than an hour.
Sure. You mentioned something now about talking to people who are essentially your competitors to figure out problems, and it
Mm-hmm.
leads to the collaborative nature of business. And there are certainly some businesses that, keep everything close to the chest and don't want to share any of that and
Mm-hmm.
get that advantage. But you mentioned early on that there's less competition in your specific business than there would be if you were a coffee roaster. And I think that kind of also means there's less people that know what you're going through at your work on any given day, so
Sure.
you can maybe commiserate. Am I understanding that maybe that's something that
Yeah,
happens?
it's kind of again, like I mentioned, it's a specific role, right? And so there are very specific problems. And yeah, we can not only share information about how to solve those problems, but also vent to each other a little bit, right? And kind of talking back to what you said about collaboration, that is really something that I love about coffee, and I just want to throw that out there, that I have an opportunity to talk to direct competitors on a daily basis, and we're friends, and we can actually help each other, which is something that I don't see in other industries, right? I haven't worked in a lot of other industries, obviously, but especially working with my family and getting their kind of backgrounds in automotive and manufacturing, et cetera, right? That it's not that way in their industries. And so that was kind of a learning curve for them, I think, is like, no, guys, we are open, and we're basically open books to anyone that wants to check us out. So that's a little bit different, and something that I really appreciate in coffee.
I noticed that when I was scrolling through your social media feeds, that at least in a very small way, you had some coffee plants that you had planted. Maybe they're just for the desk or whatever. But it
Mm-hmm.
kind of made me wonder how you guys feel about the growth in domestic coffee crops. Pro, against, I think it's going to succeed, niche. Any sort of
Yeah.
thoughts that come up from that.
I mean, I just grow the coffee plants as kind of a learning experiment, right? I've
Hmm.
killed quite a few babies, unfortunately. It's pretty sad. But for me, it's more about like watching the plant and, oh, if I give it this nutrition, it reacts this way, etc. As far as domestic cultivation, I think it's interesting to me. I've been following it for a while. You've got coffee growing north of Santa Barbara, right? That's been there for quite some time. I think I first tasted it back in uh, about 2015 or something, and it wasn't great. It wasn't very good either. Unfortunately, I think these types of products kind of become overhyped, and they turn into something other than what they really are. They turn into marketing, really, which I'm not a huge fan of. But at the same time, it's coffee. How do I put this? Coffee is a complex thing, right? And what's going on with our climate is challenging, what we can do with coffee. And so I think the research aspect of attempting to grow coffee in different areas that traditionally you wouldn't think to do it is a good thing. Overall, I think the entire world is really trying to figure out, hey, how can we grow this stuff long term? I'm talking like 20, 50, 100 years. So I really appreciate it as kind of a research project. I just hope that it doesn't turn into this kind of overhyped marketing ploy, right? Or like a cash grab or something. And as far as the quality itself, on a blind cupping table, I don't think it'll ever compete with a lot of the coffees that we're working with.
Sure. There's an interesting kind of balancing act, I would imagine, that domestic people that are attempting domestic growth are. And we've talked to a few on the show who have been very upfront about some of the marketing and some of the rarity of it causing the prices to be what they are, but also
Right.
saying, but that's how we're funding the research side of it. And that's how we're
Sure. Right.
right. And I think there's some interest in that. And I've been following it mostly because I've met people through this show that have kind of turned me on to the idea of it. And it is just a really interesting concept. But even they, who have talked, Jay Rusky from Fringe Coffee,
Mm,
we talked to in the show, and one of the things he said was he doesn't view any of the coffee that he grows as a replacement for coffee that's coming in from producers that have been
right.
around. He views it
Right.
as this is something I'm passionate about and learning about, and I want to see grow, and also I'm a farmer who has a business. And
Sure.
so it's an interesting balancing act. I didn't mean to put you on the spot too much there, but
Hopefully he's not listening to me.
oh, I'm sure Jay listens to this show every episode. He'll probably call you tomorrow. No, if anything, I will say that most of the people that I've met that are producing coffee on any scale have been very open to conversation about the concept, because I think there's
Right.
a lot of levels of coffee production from beyond just the product, but into how employees are treated around the world and coffee farmers, the
Mm,
market that they're in, and how domestic crops could impact them and vice versa, that I think everyone's sensitive to.
right.
You mentioned early on that you got your start at McDonald's making McCafes, and it made me think of my dad, who I know used to always make sure he got his coffee from McDonald's every morning. He might still do that, but I also know that he's taken a step up in his coffee drinking as well, and
There you go.
he wouldn't have if he wasn't drinking coffee at McDonald's at one point. So, is there anything we didn't talk about today about your business, about you, that you think people should know about?
Give me some time to collect on that.
Yeah, take a minute, and I can also ask you. Maybe this is probably a better question that we can address, which is who among your partners does the most work.
Oh
You could put that
man.
on the record. Just
You're
kidding.
gonna get me
Uh,
killed.
what I do want to know is if you're out grabbing a cup of coffee from somewhere else, maybe you're visiting a roaster. What is it that you're ordering? What do you kind of gravitate to as a person?
I would say I'm 90% or more just a black filter drip coffee for a couple of reasons. That's what I like. I really drink that at home, whether it's a manual brew or I use my Bonavita brewer a lot. But I also think I actually think it's a good judge of quality and attention to detail at a coffee shop level. The batch brew often kind of gets lumped into this batch brew category. And, if someone is paying close attention to that category, then it kind of says a lot about the attention to detail and commitment to quality. So I usually use it kind of as a twofold criteria, right?
Yeah, it's a barometer for
Yeah.
if they put attention into this, what is maybe stereotypically looked at as the lower end offering,
Hmm.
then it's only going to be that much better as you go up the chain.
Sure.
And the coffee I was drinking today, this morning, Dove, was a batch brew, and it was great. And I had one the other day from another roaster in town, and I walked out of there going, "Oh my god, like that batch brew was amazing!" Because I do the same thing, as you. And also, it's a good way for me to create a baseline of coffee experiences around town.
Right. That's a good point too.
A minute ago, I asked you kind of if there was anything else that we should know about HCS, and I might add to that by just saying if I were a new coffee roaster, kind of getting my start, and
Hmm.
either on a small scale or starting a cafe, how does that relationship with you start as the person who's sourcing coffee?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of times I get emails, from people that will just say, "Hey, send me a price list," and that's not how we really operate. So my response to that is always, yeah, I'll get you a price list, but let's have a conversation first. Let me find out what you actually do, what your goals are, what you need, and I can make, better recommendations. Maybe you don't need the most expensive coffee for what you're looking for, or you don't want to buy this less expensive coffee because it's not going to meet your customer expectations, right? Really getting to work with us is about that first phone call, and usually it's 30 minutes to an hour, honestly, and it's almost like an interview back and forth. I like to share kind of what we're all about. So I really appreciate this opportunity because I feel like a lot of the things we're talking about are kind of in that vein of what those phone calls go. We talk about my background, how we can help specifically, and then kind of get into the coffee last, which maybe is not the more traditional route. But again, it's about creating something that's a win for everybody, right? In a recurring kind of way, so that these customers, it's really about trust. We need to build trust with each other, trust that we can get them what they need, what they're looking for, and that when we ship it, we're going to get paid, right? So I mean, that goes all the way down to the producer level, really. So maybe our workflow is a little bit different in that way, where we really like to get to know who we're working with and meet their needs specifically, rather than just kind of blanket price list and blanket ads or anything like that.
Well, and I think as the coffee is a product that isn't grown overnight, and you're working on kind of future product
Sure.
and past product, and so there has to be a longer term relationship than just buying it off the shelf and walking away.
Exactly. And being the coffee importer, the buyer, we have to buy a lot of coffee up front. And a container is about 42,000 pounds of coffee. And so we definitely do not want to overbuy. So we as kind of the middleman actor, we're really more of a sourcing partner than just like selling you coffee. And as you mentioned, sometimes we may not have the coffee that you're looking for several months, right? But those conversations are extremely important to have, especially in this crazy COVID supply chain world where everything is delayed, nothing can be counted on, at least as far as shipping. And so those conversations are pretty critical in kind of the green coffee planning, right?
Sure. I think COVID has taught businesses in particular a lot of flexibility, whether they wanted to or not.
Yeah.
Because there's not much you can do if the coffee you were expecting to roast for Christmas is on a container ship until the end of January. There's just nothing you can do about it. It's there so you have to learn to adapt. So last kind of just to make sure that I'm covering it, but anything else that you thought of that we should tell people about Hacea?
No, I mean, it kind of feels weird to like plug. I feel like I'm writing an advertisement or something here, but yeah, if anyone wants to chat about green coffee, just honestly give us a call or email us. We've got a lot of great information on our website about the coffees, and yeah, let's cup coffee.
To recap from the interview, Hacea Coffee Source is the connecting point between a coffee's origin and the domestically located coffee roasters, and a resource for coffee education. There are advantages and disadvantages to working with close family. And finally, the name Hacea is a mashup of Jared's last name, Hales, and Rubacea, which is the parent plant of the coffee family. Think of it as Arabica and Robusta's grandparent. There is still some dispute as to how to pronounce the company name, but whether you say Hacea or Hacea, they'll answer the phone if you're calling about green coffee. You can find more info about the company's coffee services, including green coffee sales and coffee education classes, at haceacoffee.com. And of course, I'll link to it on roastwestcoast.com. Thank you for listening to the show today. The next Coffee Smarter episode will be out later this week. Chris O'Brien is back, and while we start and end on the topic of barista competitions, we really meander down a winding path to get there. Thanks to the Roast West Coast coffee industry partners, Cafe Laterre, Ignite Coffee Company, Mostra Coffee Company, Leap Coffee, Maria Coffee, Steady State Coffee Roasting, Coffee Cycle Roasting, Camp Coffee Company, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, First Light Whiskey, and Zumbar Coffee and Tea. This episode of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Wolt. I hope this show has found you happy, healthy, and with at least enough sanity and coffee to make it through another day. And please, always tip your baristas, and be sure to drink good coffee. Hey there, thanks for listening all the way to the end. If you liked this episode of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast, and you want more and more coffee content, please consider buying us a cup of coffee or signing up for a paid subscription to the Roast West Coast newsletter. That would be phenomenal. And with enough subscribers, I'll be able to focus on creating coffee content for you all day, every day. Subscriptions are a great way to show appreciation for this show. Just head to roastwestcoast.com to subscribe or leave us a tip. And this month, I'll donate 100% of the new subscriber proceeds to a humanitarian aid group supporting Ukrainian refugees. There are links on roastwestcoast.com to some of those groups if you're interested in doing so yourself. Thanks for listening, everyone.